So we're going to start this podcast today. Johnny Davis presents Word of Mouth, and we're doing this as a way to get a digital mouthpiece out in front of us, talking about the talented individuals that we work with on a daily basis, the networks that we build and that we are a part of, as well as the community of artists and creators and creatives. We're going to start the podcast with Johnny Davis himself on it, to kind of lead us into not just why we started the podcast, why this was an idea that you were very excited about, been very enthusiastic about for the better part of a year. But then I'd also like to take a moment and go back in time and say that this podcast is the latest evolution of your studio. Where did that entire concept come from? Like, what were some of the original ideas and concepts that led you to want to get into commercial work and then grow that into something that is as big as what we are, surrounded with now?
Well, and it's like you said initially, the podcast mainly was like our idea, trying to figure out how to give props back to the people that we work with and to call them out and show that everything they bring to the industry, and helping us to tell their story.
Okay.
So that was kind of, originally we were talking about doing the podcast to try to create interest in what we were doing and those kinds of things. But then it kind of evolved in not just talking about us, but talking about what everybody else is doing and being involved in what they're doing and bringing them to the forefront of the industry, whether it's design or furniture work or art or, whatever. So it really evolved into more than just staying within like our lane, I guess. We're doing a lot of other things and we want to highlight these people that we're doing them with.
Right.
Kind of growing the relationship and showing that, we're working with some incredible people and companies in the industry.
Right. So if we can jump off of that and talk about the networks and those circles that we are working in, if we have an example of sort of like the kind of conversation that we're trying to have with somebody, if we invite them in, what is that representing? Are we doing this? We're not monetarily gaining anything from this podcast. This is strictly just a creative way to reach the people that we work with and those that we want to work with.
Right. It's building relationships. And, what I've tried to really build this company off of is collaborating with everyone, even other photographers, other retouchers. And because as a community, we should work together and we should promote other companies that we believe in and want to work with. So for us, monetarily, it's basically something we're wanting to do to show appreciation to the people we're working with, but then to build those relationships and say, hey, we're doing these kinds of things. And then as they're in-house, building those relationships, the work and stuff like that will come as a byproduct. Right.
Yes. No, I like that. And I think that's when you and I first kind of started discussing the idea of doing this, it was the idea that like, these are conversations that we are having with these people on a daily basis. And most of the time, me coming into the industry far after you had already been kind of established in it, you would tell me stories of these same people. You would say, well, you know what they did back here and they did this and they revolutionized this side of it. And, I've known them for 10 years. And everybody has these stories, these kind of tremendous stories that you hear around the way. It kind of builds a bit of like a mythos around some of the people that we work with on a daily basis. So when we're approaching these conversations, I always want to try to stay mindful of the journey that someone's taken to get to the point where they're sitting with us.
Right, exactly. Because, and it's like you say, well, and you've been an integral part of all this stuff. We branched out from furniture. Now we're doing, day in the life with different designers, and we're bringing in a lot of different companies that we didn't do work with before. So, what I'm hoping with this podcast is, we're introducing maybe a furniture manufacturer with a designer that needs a need, has a need that to be met, so we can kind of bridge the gap.
I like that.
And, in doing that, we're on the forefront of everybody's, thoughts. And, well, we want to work with these guys because they're helping us get to another level.
Right.
And that's what we're hoping to help them with, and we're hoping, to be a part of all that.
And I think that as we're talking about that, and we're talking about sort of like being part of those conversations and sort of positioning ourselves at sort of the forefront of what the industry's doing. We're working with a lot of talented collaborators, with HPXD, with Erica Sorit and Don Brinson at A New Day. We're working with more and more of these like shakers and movers in the industry that we are experts in. And I would like to, before we go back into sort of your past and where you came from, I would like to talk a little bit about how just recently you've kind of started accepting the fact that you are an expert in your field and sort of embracing that versus sort of shying away and saying, we're happy to, work in the background. Talk to me a little bit about the recent sort of epiphany that you've kind of gone through where you've decided, we are very good at what we do, and we can share the spotlight with all the people that we do it with, and the community in that collaborative spirit, it's kind of coming up with us.
Yeah, and that's been a big transition for me is to kind of coming into that role, because we always have been kind of in the back stage of doing everything just production oriented and stuff, but I feel like I'm doing an injustice to the people that work with me here in this company not being that person, because everybody here brings such a high level of professionalism and quality to everything they're doing. And if I'm not at the forefront of saying, hey, we are good at this, and then I'm really doing an injustice to our retouchers, our videographers, our photographers, our grips, everybody that's involved, because we do bring another level. And I've seen it across the board. And, I'm very proud of what we produce. I'm very proud of our people, and it's been a journey. It's been a long journey to get to where we're at. So why not be that company,
Right.
and have other companies come to you for suggestions and stuff, because they do already.
Right.
But we do it, in a kind of like behind the scenes,
Absolutely.
which is fine. But we are here to stay, and we need to let people know who we are more.
I agree.
Not that by any means we're, a force to be reckoned with or anything, because even we want people to know who we are, so when you have problems, you can come to us and we can help you through those
Right.
problems. And we can collaborate with other companies and maybe get you further down the road. You can help us get further down the road. So it's never, my biggest problem is I'm very humble about what we do, because we are behind the scenes. We do a good job. I stand behind our product.
Yes, you do.
And I'm proud of what we do. But, I need for other people to know the level of quality that we do, because a lot of companies don't even know we offer video services,
Right.
or we offer design services, or we offer color services, because we have been, a silo photography facility for years.
Right.
But our room scene photography is amazing, and our video stuff has blown me away how great the quality is with that. So we need to let people know what we're doing and be in front of, companies that may have these needs, and then come to us for suggestions or collaborations to do these projects. So
I like the idea that, and just recently you and I were in a conversation with someone, and the entire time that I've worked with you, you've been very vocal about the fact that you see collaboration over competition.
Oh yeah,
and I
sure.
think that you're part of this creative push that we're starting to see a little bit more of, but I think that you're probably one of the first people to really embrace the knocking down that gatekeeper's role. When we were talking to that person a few weeks ago, they said that they love the fact that you're so for collaboration and you're not gatekeeping. For a long time in our industry, we had gatekeepers that were saying, I know everything, you know nothing, and that's the way it needs to stay because that's the only way that I'm going to make money. And you're part of sort of this new breed of these creative entrepreneurs that is sort of tearing down that mold and saying, I know what I know and you know what you know. And if we work together, the end product is 10 times better than it could be individually. So there's no siloing of our industry anymore. It's such a small community. It's such a small community to be such a large industry that we work in.
Well, and that's what's crazy about, this area, and I didn't realize it for years, but, this area is one of the highest concentrations of photographers in the nation because of the furniture industry.
Right.
And, there are some amazing photographers, in this area. And, why not be a part of that versus, well, we have this and you have that, and, you do your thing, we do our thing. We can
Right.
learn from each other so much, with photography, video, retouching, all these aspects. Why not do that? And
Right.
everybody gets better
Absolutely.
from that, because there's enough work out there for everybody.
Right. And how High Point and HPXD and the local government is really starting to push the conversation that High Point is more than even just furniture, that we're a design mecca. They're positioning us to rival international known design places like Amsterdam and Milan. And I embrace that fully. And I think that is going to just bring in more of those collaborative artists and those creatives.
I agree. But, and it's funny to me hearing these conversations, because I agree with what they're trying to do. I think it's amazing because there is so much talent here. There are amazing, photographers, videographers, artists in this area. But, when you're talking with people that aren't from here, or are from here, I guess, you're talking about High Point being this big mecca, and growing up in High Point, it's like, whoa, that's a stretch. But for the past, the last 5 years especially, High Point has changed dramatically, and it is wonderful to see it. And where our studio is positioned is kind of like right in the middle of all this transition, so that's exciting for us, and it's exciting to see where we're going in High Point, and being a part of that, and being part of HPXD, because they've been amazing partners with Jane and getting us in front of people and helping us transition all these different industries.
Yes. And I like to talk a little bit about that too, where we're sitting in our studio now, but just in the last 12 months, we have seen an expansion on your entire business model. Can you talk to us a little bit about the studio that we built on Green, and why that mattered, and why that kind of changed even the direction of the commercial photography side, not counting our video, not counting all the other arenas that we play in? Just having that studio space was something of a realized dream for you, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure. And we're excited to expand on that. And we've always wanted studio space. We've had a lot of interest in it. We've never really pushed it because we couldn't find the right place and timing wasn't right. But now it definitely is, and it has changed dramatically. And we've had a lot of interest in it, and it's created a lot more creative freedom for us to do some things that we've wanted to do. And down the road, it's even going to be better and better, because we have a lot of projects, we're working through personal projects that I think, again, it's getting your voice out there.
Right.
And it's fun. It's a lot of fun versus, just grinding it out every day on the same things. We're able to do a lot of new things and position ourselves to be on the forefront of these bigger projects.
Right. So to talk about, sort of where the studio originated, how long have you been in business by yourself, for yourself? Like, how long have you been a commercial photographer for the furniture industry?
I went in business for myself in 2010.
Okay. So you've been doing this for 14 plus years at this point.
Yeah, on my own, 14 plus years. I did photography for another company for several years previous to that, and I was able to go out on my own and start this. And like I say, it's been a long journey, but getting, as you're going through and the clients you have and the people you're working with, I've been very blessed with those situations, and it's helped me to get to where I'm at, because you can't do it by yourself.
Right.
And again, I guess, looking back at my career, I never came into this knowing all this stuff. I was trained by, professionals who are way better than I am on things. And I was fortunate to learn from really talented people. So I guess that's how I've kind of kept that motto in my head, is like, why not give back, and why not be a part of something bigger? And as you're growing, you're building a network.
Right.
That, if something happens and I'm sick or something, I can call on one of these other individuals that I've built this relationship with to help me out. And I hope they feel the same way. And that's what, across the board, I want this company to stand for. Right. Not anything but collaboration, and we're here to help and those kinds of things.
And that shines through. I've told you, as long as I've known you, that I think you're a very good example of servant leadership, and kind of you practice what you preach, and you're beside every person in the staff, and you support us all the way through. And at the end of the day, you will own any mistake that anybody in the company makes. You take that on yourself, and you work with the relationships you've built with the people that we work with to make sure that we improve. If we fall down, we improve. But we always, and I think down to everybody on your staff, they see that the collaboration starts here. Every part of our company is collaborative with all the other parts of our company. And I think it speaks well for yourself that, if you have a shooter out on a set and they need a grip, that you volunteer to grip, that there's nothing that is beneath you. If there's a project that needs to be handled, if it's a last minute event, instead of trying to figure out who to delegate that to, half the time you just take it on yourself and you say, well, I'm a photographer at the end of the day. I think that's impressive. When you had the idea to do a studio, 15 years ago, did you visualize a studio? Did you visualize studio space? Was that a dream? Was this I guess I'm curious about what inspires you and how often you go back to the well and say, 15 years ago when I had this idea, I would have never seen myself where I'm at, or yes, I did see myself where I'm at. And this has all been steady progress, advancing me to that next stage to allow that next part of my original vision to flourish.
Well, I mean, it's not that grandeur of a scheme, I guess. For me, whenever I went into business, it was strictly out of necessity for where I was financially in life. I was going through some personal issues and I had to make some decisions and decided I was at a low point in life, so I was going to go out in business for myself because what did I have to lose at that point?
Right.
So as things transitioned and I started proving myself to myself, I felt better and better about it. And I always felt like, I wanted to do this, but I never took that leap until I was basically, had your feet to the fire and just I got to do this now.
Right.
And so in doing it, I've had really great people working with me, and it started out with just me and Dustin Green, and
right.
He's been phenomenal. He's still with us and does a great job, and brought on Tim Jones, and he's been wonderful. And so then we added in Tyrone Andrews, Big Mike. We got Grips coming through, and then there were more people added, and and again it is a process. And then whenever you start adding people on, for me it's we are a family,
right?
And everybody here means the world to me, and for me it's personal that this grows,
right?
Because if it doesn't grow, then people are going to have a hard time,
right.
And for me that's where I guess my drive is, and trying to push and push and push. And in doing that, I guess with good intention and doing a good job, everybody here, not just me, our client base has grown. Our customer service has always been really well,
right.
really good. So, and our quality work is amazing. So, everything is based off of good intention,
right.
and trying to grow the company, and it has grown generically for years. Word of mouth, and it's done really well. But now, with bringing with you on board and stuff, you've taken the company in a whole different direction, which is amazing to me, because I would have never seen us going in this direction, having designers and well, and that's another reason the studio was a possibility, because we're doing all these other things, and let's get in front of all these people,
right.
and do something amazing. Because, we can make it doing what we're doing, but we offer so much more. So why not utilize the people's gifts that we have in place and add upon that? Because we are very much a teaching facility.
Absolutely. That was going to be the next thing I was actually going to mention was, I think that everybody who comes to Johnny Davis Studios, they come because they have this desire to take whatever talent they have. And sometimes that talent comes down to just taking initiative and showing the determination and hard work to put in to figure out lighting or figure out video or sound. None of us have come to you from a professional market. We've come to you saying, I know a little bit, but I have a huge desire. And I think it speaks very well again to you as a person and an entrepreneur, that after a successful photography career, after making a name for yourself and being considered an expert in your area in the still life photography and in furniture photography, room scenes and vignettes, most creatives and most entrepreneurs at that point would say, this is what I'm very good at. I'm going to just kind of build a castle around myself here because I know where my profit margins are and I know what I have in it. And I know that I'm very good at what I do. And I've got this core group of people around me. And so I think it's interesting that at that time in your life where everything kind of was coming up spades, you decided to make a huge gamble and say, it's not enough. You know, there's people around me that have the talent and the ability to do video. And so I'm going to nurture that. I'm going to pay them to learn more and more and more about the skill set. And you're behind them the whole way, you know, championing them on and saying, this looks good. How does it look better? How do we make this more efficient? But you're growing that studio at a time where you didn't need to. You know, a lot of people in your shoes, I think, would have said that's somebody else's problem. I don't need to get into video. I'm very good at photography.
Well, and yeah, and that's where it goes back to, I'm not a very good businessman, because
No,
I should have done that. You know, looking back at my financial statements, I should have definitely done that. But again, you know, to me, all you guys are family. You know, and in order to do that, there would have to be dynamic changes to the company, and I don't want that. I want everybody to grow with the company, and you know, grow in knowledge and experience. You know, and financially too. Everybody should benefit, and that's what I'm really trying to do here, I guess, is that's more than anything.
And as we start the Word of Mouth podcast, that is sort of the word, because you are, while being very transparent to your staff and the people around you, you're also very, very, very humble, and you don't really give yourself enough credit for sort of like creating something that is a bit unprecedented in the design world, you know, to allow, you know, all of your misfit toys to come in here, and we take the best parts of ourselves and we grow and we learn from each other, and we're constantly kind of growing and evolving and testing the waters, and you encourage that. And I think there's a lot of companies that pretend that they encourage that, collaborative and community, you know, kind of an open forum. But enough of us who have worked in the design industry, yourself, myself, our retouchers up front, when they come in, they take this big relaxing breath and they say, this is different. This is a different culture. This is a culture where I can say what I want. I can throw out an idea. If it sticks now, or maybe it sticks later, maybe we put a pin in that and we wait till we're, you know, down the road a little bit on it, and we get resourceful. But it is encouraging to come into a place where you feel like you are open to do whatever you want to do that day, because there's no limit. And, you know, from the top down, we're encouraged to dream. You know, we're encouraged to constantly think and get creative and get outside the box. And, you know, if you think that would look cool, maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe it's a learning, you know, step. You know, we've done videos before that we thought would turn out amazing, and then when we got done, we stepped back and we said, it worked, but how do we make this better? How do we take our vision and make that better? And you're constantly the one back there encouraging that growth and development and education of our skill sets. And there's not a whole lot of companies that are doing that right now. They want people to come in, maximum efficiency. I'm going to pay you the least amount I can. I'm going to work you the most amount I can. And when I find someone that does your job better than you, you're out the door and they're in.
Well, yeah. And I've worked in a lot of those companies too. And, you know, it does mean a lot to me that you guys show up every day, you know, because I don't know if I would work for myself. But, you know, it is, you know, Katie and I, my wife, we had this talk the other day, and it's like, you know, why do you do it? You work in the long hours and doing all these other things and worried about making this and doing that. And it is about, for me, you know, it is about seeing everybody grow and giving back, because you're right. I could do something totally different and make really good money.
Yeah.
But I choose to do this and everybody grow with the company, and then, you know, create something that is amazing.
I like that.
And then you leave a legacy, you know, down the road. And that's, you know, in the end, that's what I want. I
like that.
I want people to talk about all the people we have working here and the company. And, you know, it was a great place to be, you know.
I remember hearing something that a designer and a creative, you can't look out the windshield and see what you do. You can't see your talent in the windshield. You look in the rearview mirror. You know, that your legacy as a creative isn't what you set out to do. It's what you ended up accomplishing. And that, you know, as a creative, the last day that we work in the industry is probably our best day. It's not a diminishing skill set by and large. We're constantly growing and evolving. And so the last day you work is probably when you were at the top of your game. You know, you don't hit a peak and then fall off. And I like that. And I see that around, you know, I'm by no means the, you know, most senior person that works here, but I'm not the youngest either. And so, you know, you see people that are, you know, older than you and your same age and younger than you. And you're constantly, the analogy I give you a lot when you and I have these conversations is to me, it's a sled dog mentality. You know, you've got 8 sled dogs pulling as hard as they can, you know, in front of the sled, and you're seeing the sled progress along, and you're constantly kind of seeing like the turns and the twists and getting down the road on something and then getting hung up on the ice a little bit, but finding a creative way around it and then reassessing and looking back. You know, we look back at video projects that we did a year or two ago and we say, wow, can you believe we did it that way?
Right.
We've learned so much in 2 years.
Well,
Not
yeah.
a bit of it is educational classroom. It is hands-on trial and error.
Right. And again, we have great customers to work with that allow us to help them out with different projects that, you know, we get to test the waters or we'll do test jobs on things just to see what happens. But, you know, again, it goes back to you guys putting in the work and putting forth the effort and believing in the whole vision of it all, because it is easy to come in and just get a paycheck and go home because you don't have any skin in the game at that point.
Right.
But I really truly feel like everybody here does have skin in the game, and they want the company to be better because they see the progression that it's taking.
Right.
Because you can work for anybody and make a paycheck.
Yep.
But, you know, I feel like here you're given the opportunity, like you said, to be creative. Yeah, we may not be able to do that project right now, but let's hold on to it and look at maybe doing it down the road.
Right.
And why not? Because we all here, you know, a lot of people haven't been in this industry, but most of the people here are very creative and they have great ideas.
Very
And
much.
let's think about those ideas and figure out how we can get down on, you know, further down the road on those. And so it is fun to see the transition and see what everybody comes up with. And yeah, we can't get to everything, but there are things that we have done that have turned out amazing.
So as we're looking down the road, I guess, you know, the next, you know, logical, you know, point is looking down the road a little bit, you know, including this podcast, and, you know, where do you see the studio evolving in the next 12 to 24 months? Like, what does the next couple years look like for Johnny Davis?
Well, I wish I knew, you know, tomorrow is that's what I'm trying to get my head
Where's your
around.
dream taking you?
Well, I mean, down the road, like I say, I have a lot of personal projects that I wanted to do for years. And, you know, I like to spend more time doing some of those. You know, I think that would be fun. It'd just be more stuff just for me and getting out in front of people just to, there it is. You know, it's part of you. You should be able to show that to people.
Absolutely.
Versus just coming in and grinding it out, you know, every day on production stuff. There is a lot more here to offer. And those are things I'd like to show down the road, you know, and get in with companies, you know. You and I've talked about doing campaigns, you know, for ideas that we have that we think are great ideas, maybe doing campaigns to draw in companies to do more creative things. You know, doing those kinds of things would be wonderful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm happy with the way the company's going. I'm excited to see what happens, you know, in the next 6 months to 12 months or whatever, because we have a lot of new things implemented. And that's what's really nice about what we're doing is it is constantly evolving to the next thing. It's not so much just you're stuck in one place.
Right.
And I think that is a tribute to, you know, the people we have on staff and able to get us to those different places and you know, have opportunities that we didn't have before.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think that even the production side of things, you know, while, you know, Silo photography has stayed by and large the same, you know, we're working with, you know, the partners we have in the industry to, you know, look at new lighting, you know, new ways to imagine something that's been done for years and years. So even that is progressive. Even that does have an air of, you know, creativity in it. catalog layout, and merging the gap between something that's going to live digitally on like an e-com site versus those catalogs that are becoming almost like catalogs of fine art. They're
Right.
becoming these just beautiful. I was in Barnes & Noble a few weeks ago, and I noticed that magazines are not as plentiful as they used to be, but they're calling these things bookazines. And so they'll do 12 a year, 6 a year, whatever. But now they're thick. It's almost like a trade comic book that you would have got back in the day. They're thick. They're $30 on the newsstand, but they're beautiful. And they're not selling a bunch of ads as much as they're selling a bunch of moments, a bunch of these gorgeous vignettes that are lit beautifully. So we still have trade publications, and we still have print work that we're pursuing, and the fine art side of print work, doing things like posters and limited edition runs, and getting into, the artistry behind something as simple as printmaking. You and I have spoken before, and a project that I desperately want to do, especially before you kick off.
Don't even talk about that.
The pre-press documentary.
Oh God,
it's going to be amazing.
Nobody's
going to
watch it. Nobody's going to listen to it.
We're going to have to just tap on some nursing homes and those people your age that are still on 2 feet and talk to them.
But I do think that we had talked about with the podcasts and stuff. One of the things I am very excited about is doing the instructional kind of podcast videos.
Talk to us about that. That's going to be super fun.
Yeah, I think that'll be nice. But what I've always run into is, coming up through the industry, you're working with different people and you're trying to learn as much as you can. But, it's kind of limited what we do as far as commercial photography, how you set things up, how you do retouch, and what are you thinking about composition wise. I mean, so what I'm hoping to do with this whole series is to go into how we're setting up a room scene.
Right.
Lighting wise, our designers, what the photographer's thinking.
Right.
And go through all different aspects of that, and then, have the final product. And, you and I had talked about, or you brought up the idea of having almost like a live questionnaire thing that people can shoot questions in to ask, why are you guys doing this?
Yes,
yeah, and
absolutely.
I think that'd be really cool. Then you can give feedback as you're working through different things.
Because that's usually how the questions come up. As someone who was trained by you in commercial photography, I didn't know how to ask a question until I ran into a problem. So when people are tuning into something like a live session and they've got you styling a shot and you're going to light the shot and they're asking live questions. Why did you put the grid in?
Right.
Why do you use a shoe guard? What does that do? What's my ISO supposed to be at? From camera control to composition and lighting, I think that there's a world of knowledge that people don't even know how to ask the right question. They just know their image isn't what they want their image to be.
Right. And I think that's where I think we are very relatable in that. And, the photography jargon that a lot of people use is above a lot of people's heads, and it's above my head. So, talking with people and walking through it is more kind of the man on the street kind of thought process. So I think a lot of people will benefit from it because it is very relatable to the average photographer, average person wanting to learn photography or design or, all aspects of that. So I am excited about that.
I think that'll be very exciting too. I think that, we've got a couple of good creative projects and, we're still pushing our production and our schedule. As a studio, I don't know. I can't speak to the years that I wasn't with you, but I think that we're busier than we've ever been.
Oh yeah,
so
for
I think
sure.
that the future is looking, it's so vibrant with the possibilities that are surrounding us, and working with the talented team, of creatives that we work with. Every day you're expecting those new ideas to kind of come in through the door and make sense of it. What do we see? What do we do?
Right.
We're a say yes company. I've always liked the fact that, we are very much a say yes company. There's no box to fit in. We're designing the world around us.
Well, and I think too, we used to have some really high peaks and valleys, before when we were seasonal work.
Right.
And now it is starting to level out more, which is great because everybody's staying busy throughout the year. We're able to do more projects throughout the year, and it's not so much, we're busy, spring and fall, and then try to figure out what we're going to do with the rest of the time.
Yes.
So, and again, it goes back to the people involved and being proactive and wanting to move forward with something different, whether it's doing test shoots on something for something down the road, or if it's researching equipment, getting it in and testing it out. Those are the things that we're starting to do now, which it saves us time,
Right.
when we're on set.
Right. No, I agree completely. And I think that, going back to sort of the purpose of the podcast and how we want this to be a vehicle that drives it, the reason we are doing a podcast that has a visual component is to show that this is a cinematic setup. And I do want to do things that we're posting on social media that's going to show the behind the scenes. Like we know what the viewer is going to see when they see this, when they hear it. But, there's a lot of work that has gone into this little corner of our studio over the last couple of days.
Well, and it goes back to educating, the next Ken Lewis or Johnny Davis or whoever who wants to get into this kind of thing, help them get down the road on things.
Absolutely.
So this was a good introductory, to our podcast system that we're trying to put in place. And, we look forward to more of these, and we're going to bring in our customers, designers, other people in the industries, not just furniture, but everywhere, to be a part of this. So we hope you guys tune in.
Yeah.
And we look forward to the next one that we're going to put together.
No, I think that's great. And I mean, I'm excited at the idea that this podcast is also going to have a bit of a mobile feature to it. So when we're coming into showrooms and designer spaces, we can bring this setup with us. That way, we're experiencing their world, because if you host or if I host, whoever's talking across from that other person, bringing them into our space gives them a glimpse into our world. But we want to make sure that we're providing the viewer and the listener, because everything that we're going to be talking about largely is going to have a very visual component to it.
Right.
And so to be able to seam in some of that visual component with, their showroom, their lines, their personality, I think that it's going to bring an additional element to the podcast that audio just simply wouldn't do.
Well, and we had talked about that too, going to different showrooms or different things and highlighting some of their, things that they want to show, not only just speaking in the podcast, but visual elements, which will be wonderful, because I think, again, it gives a better picture of what everybody's trying to say.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, this was good. I like this. I think this is going to be a lot of fun to produce and make. And we appreciate everyone tuning in for this kind of our origin episode. And we'll be back with the next guest in a week.
Sounds great.
Perfect. Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you, Ken.